Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm really excited you're joining us today because we're not just, looking at dates and names from the past. We're actually taking a journey, trying to experience the very beginnings of human ingenuity, thinking about the sheer scale of what people achieved. Sometimes it's just, well, it's mind-blowing. Our mission for this deep dive anyway is to explore the mysteries, the wonders, and some truly amazing facts about ancient civilizations. These aren't just old stories. They're basically the roots of human greatness, the foundation for so much of who we are today.
Exactly. And that's why digging into this stuff is still so relevant.
Yeah.
What we find in these ancient worlds, it gives us real insight into what makes humans kick, our ability to organize, our creativity, how incredibly resilient we can be. It's not just about what they built, it's more about why. What did that tell us about what people really care about deep down? What can we learn from their struggles, their successes, about that basic human need to, well, leave a mark?
That's a perfect way to put it. So for our exploration today, we've gone through, honestly, a mountain of sources. We've got research papers, archaeological findings, historical takes, our own notes, just pulling out the really key bits of knowledge. We're going to move through different places, different times, digging up surprising facts and those moments that make you go, aha. Make history feel alive. Think of this as your shortcut to getting really clued in on these foundational times in human history, but delivered like a good chat, not a lecture. Something to really keep you hooked. So, ready to uncover some secrets from our earliest innovators, because we're starting right where the idea of civilization first really took shape. Okay, first stop on our tour, Mesopotamia. Everyone calls it the cradle of civilization, right? Picture it. The fertile land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. We're talking about maybe 3200 BCE. This place wasn't just dirt and rivers. It was where the whole idea of organized society really started cooking. And the pioneers, the Sumerians, these folks were, well, they were visionaries, not just tribes wandering around.
They were inventing things on a scale that's almost hard to picture now. Things we totally take for granted. Like, can you imagine a world without writing? They came up with cuneiform, the world's first proper writing system. And not just that, they gave us the wheel, the basics of the city planning, the first written laws. Oh, and get this, even recipes for beer. It's like they crammed centuries of progress into one really intense period.
Yeah, and what's really amazing is how those inventions were all connected. They had this domino effect, especially cuneiform. Before that, everything was basically word of mouth, or maybe some really simple pictures, not very precise. But when cuneiform came along, this systematic writing, it totally changed society deep down. It wasn't just for chatting. It completely revolutionized keeping records. Suddenly, you could track complex trade deals, list out everything you owned, collect taxes systematically, being able to write down information accurately, store it. That laid the groundwork for complex government, for administration. For the first time, you could write down detailed laws, histories, even stories, poems, and pass them on without relying on memory. This wasn't just better communication. It was the birth of bureaucracy, really.
Yeah.
And complex culture as we know it allowed for a whole new level of organization, of control that just wasn't possible before.
And the wheel.
Right.
And we always think transportation first, chariots, carts. But its first uses were actually quite different, weren't they? Maybe even more fundamental for just daily life back then.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. While, eventually it was used for carts and things, its first big impact was probably pottery, the potter's wheel. That meant you could make pots way faster, and they'd all be pretty much the same size and shape, standardized. That's a huge leap from coiling clay by hand. Suddenly you have uniform pots for storing food, cooking, and, for trade. Mass production, basically. That streamlined daily life, boosted the economy. And then, early water wheels, or things using that circular motion that would have massively improved farming, irrigation, getting water to the fields. Think about feeding bigger cities, more people living together. That leads to more specialized jobs. So these seemingly simple things that completely reshaped everyday life helped crafts develop and built trade networks that stretched for miles and miles, spreading goods, but also ideas.
Okay, to really get a feel for this, let's look at a concrete example. From Babylon, a bit later in Mesopotamia. Hammurabi's code. Most people know the phrase, an eye for an eye. Sounds pretty brutal to us now, but what does this set of written laws actually tell us about their society, their values? How important was it for setting up order in those early cities?
It's crucial to look beyond just how harsh it sounds to us. The idea of writing laws down, like Hammurabi did, was monumental. Before that, justice was often just. Whatever the local leader felt like that day, or tribal customs that varied all over the place. Hammurabi's code, carved onto those big stone pillars put out in public, it made the rules clear, visible, accessible. So punishments, even if they were severe, were at least supposed to be consistent. People knew what was expected, what happened if they broke the rules. And an eye for an eye, the lex talionis. Yeah, it seems harsh, but the underlying idea was actually to limit revenge, proportional justice, stop endless feuds. It brought a sense of order, predictability, accountability, which you absolutely needed if you had diverse groups of people living together in a city. Prevent chaos. It tells us they valued stability, accountability, and a basic kind of fairness. Even if the penalties were different depending on your social status, the law applied to everyone in theory. This code, it's not just some old rock, it's the foundation stone for pretty much all legal systems that came later.
That's a great point. So thinking about all these Mesopotamian verse writing, the wheel, laws, how do these things from, what, 5,000 years ago, how do they still connect to us? How do they influence our world right now?
Well, if you zoom out, Mesopotamia basically shows us the very first steps toward organized society as we know it, and critical thinking about how to govern. The basic idea of written laws, that's the backbone of our legal systems today, everywhere. The concept that rules should be public, consistent, even if we don't always achieve it perfectly, that comes straight from them. Our whole modern world runs on the wheel, doesn't it? Not just cars and trains, but gears, turbines, countless machines, and writing itself. Storing information, managing complex organizations, running governments, schools. It all traces back to those first Sumerian scribbles. They drew the blueprint for how humans could live together in large cooperative groups with some kind of central control. It's the origin story for how we manage things, how we build things, even how we learn. We're still standing on the foundations they laid, really.
Okay, from those fertile river plains where cities first popped up, let's journey now along another massive river that defined a whole civilization, the Nile. Next up, ancient Egypt. Now, when you say Egypt, most people think pyramids, pharaohs, and yeah, they're iconic. But Egypt was so much more than that, so much deeper. And the key, the thing that sustained them for millennia, was the Nile River. It wasn't just water, it was their lifeline, almost like a god itself. It shaped everything. Farming, religion, how they saw the universe.
Absolutely. The Nile's flood, which happened predictably every year, was everything. It brought that rich silt, guaranteed good harvests. That food surplus supported a huge population, which meant not everyone had to farm. People could specialize, become priests, scribes, artisans, builders. And that predictability, plus the Nile being a natural highway for boats, it created this incredible sense of stability, continuity. For over 3,000 years, that stability let them pour energy into huge projects and into these incredibly elaborate beliefs, especially around death and the afterlife. Mummification, for instance. That wasn't just about preserving a body, it was deeply spiritual, a careful ritual to make sure the person made it to the afterlife and could be reborn. They believed the physical body was essential for the soul, the ka, to recognize and return to in the next world. So mummification was this act of deep respect, showing their profound belief in life continuing beyond death.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. What does this intense focus, almost an obsession with the afterlife, tell us about how they saw the world? What were their main priorities? It feels like more than just preparing for death, right?
It points to a worldview where everything was connected. Life on Earth wasn't the end game. It was just one phase, a temporary stop in this eternal cosmic cycle. So their priorities weren't just about gaining power or wealth for this life. It was about ensuring a smooth transition to the next one, which they imagined as a kind of perfected version of this life. And that belief soaked into everything: their art, their giant buildings, their laws, social structure, even everyday rituals. Preparing tombs, burying people with goods they'd need, building temples. It all shows a society deeply focused on spiritual purpose, on hoping for eternity. They wanted to leave a perfect legacy, make sure their journey after death went according to plan, as perfectly as possible. This way of thinking created amazing social stability, this idea of at truth, balanced cosmic order. If you lived right, did the rituals correctly, the world and the afterlife would stay in harmony. The whole government was kind of geared towards maintaining that balance.
And speaking of legacies at last, you can't talk Egypt without the pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza. It's obviously an engineering miracle. But what still just blows my mind is how perfectly it's aligned. To north, south, east, west, to the stars. It's like a giant clock or something.
It is truly mind-bogglingly precise. Its alignment to true north is off by just tiny fractions of a degree. And certain shafts inside seem to point directly at specific stars that were important back then, like the North Star of their time, or stars linked to their god Osiris. Still wondering how they did it without lasers or GPS. Well, so are engineers today, honestly. There are good theories, of course, using shadows, maybe sighting stars, using water levels to get a perfectly flat base. But the sheer scale combined with that unbelievable accuracy using the tools they had, it's still one of history's great mysteries. So what can we guess about their knowledge? It strongly suggests they really understood geometry, practical astronomy, maybe even advanced surveying methods we haven't quite figured out. Their ability to pull all that science together for construction, it tells you volumes about their brain power, their organization, and this almost obsessive drive for perfection. They weren't just building tombs, they were building cosmic statements, eternal monuments to their beliefs and their pharaoh's power, meant to last forever.
So bringing this back to us today, what can we take away from ancient Egypt? They faced huge challenges, right? Managing resources, keeping a huge society together, building stuff to last. And their solutions were, well, monumental, literally.
What's clear is that the basic challenges of running a society don't really change. The Egyptians were masters at managing resources. They understood the Nile intimately, controlled its floods, and used that surplus to fund everything else. And those huge monuments, like the pyramids, they were also powerful ways to unite the country, gave people a common goal, showed off the pharaoh's power and divine status, kept things stable for centuries. Their engineering smarts, their ability to plan for the long haul, mobilizing huge numbers of people for these massive projects. There are timeless lessons there in management and organization. They show us that humans, even with what seem like basic tools, can achieve incredible things when they're organized and have a strong sense of shared purpose, whether that purpose is spiritual, political, or both.
Okay, let's switch gears now. We're heading east, across continents, to a civilization that's often kind of overlooked but was incredibly advanced. The Indus Valley civilization, flourishing around 2500 BCE, so contemporary with early Egypt and Mesopotamia. Maybe gets less press, but wow, it was one of the most sophisticated urban cultures of its time. When you look at their cities, it's genuinely stunning.
Oh, absolutely. What's really astonishing is the level of planning. There are big cities, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa. They weren't just messy sprawls. They were laid out on a grid, really wide, straight streets, distinct areas for homes, public buildings, workshops, meticulously planned. But the real kicker, the infrastructure. Sophisticated indoor plumbing, drainage systems, honestly in some ways better than what the Romans had much later. Almost every house seems to have had access to a well and a system to get rid of waste, covered drains running under the streets. That tells you they really cared about public health, about hygiene as a society. And they use standardized weights and measures across this huge area, suggests really efficient fair trade. That kind of uniformity points to maybe a strong central authority or at least a very strong shared culture and economy. It really speaks to a society focused on efficiency, fairness, and public well-being in a way that was pretty unique for that time. Quite different from some of the more chaotic city growth elsewhere.
And then, the big mystery, the ultimate cliffhanger. Their script, we have thousands of examples, usually on little seals. But we can't read it, not a word. It's like they left us this incredible civilization with a locked diary. We see the writing, we know they could write, but we have no idea what it says. Talking about frustrating.
Yeah, the undeciphered Indus script is one of archaeology's biggest headaches. We have all these inscriptions, mostly on those seals, like you said. But the problem is we don't have a Rosetta Stone. No text written in the Indus script alongside a known language. Egyptian hieroglyphs were cracked partly because we knew Coptic, a related language. But the language behind the Indus script doesn't seem related to any known language family. We don't even know what language family it belongs to. Plus, the inscriptions are usually really short, just a few symbols. That makes it incredibly hard to analyze linguistically, to find patterns. And what that means, not being able to read their writing, is this huge gap in our understanding. We can figure out a lot about their daily life from the stuff they left behind, the cities, the pottery, the trade goods, but their history, their religion, their stories, the names of their leaders or gods. We have no direct access. It's a massive blank. Makes them probably the most mysterious of the major ancient civilizations. It's a really stark reminder of how much we rely on written records to understand the past.
That really makes you think, doesn't it? What can we actually learn from a civilization when their deepest thoughts, their own stories, are completely silent to us?
Well, what's fascinating is that even without the words, their actions speak volumes, right? Their amazing city planning, their careful craftsmanship, their wide trade networks. That tells us about their ingenuity, their values. We learn about their priorities from what they built, that focus on public health, their incredible organization. And interestingly, there's not much evidence of big palaces or lots of weapons. Maybe suggests a society that was less focused on war or powerful kings than some others, perhaps more egalitarian. It forces us to look at other kinds of evidence. What else is a civilization writing besides text? Their cities are a form of communication, telling us about social structures, civic pride. Standard weights tell us about their economy. Maybe a desire for fairness. It pushes researchers to be really creative, using material culture to piece the story together. Shows that even when the voices are gone, a civilization can still send powerful messages about who they were. highlights just how much silent testimony there is in history.
Okay, from the silence of the Indus Valley, let's jump again. Eastward and forward in time to ancient China. This is a civilization that's just a powerhouse of invention, a continuous thread of innovation stretching back thousands of years. We're talking about contributions that didn't just shape Asia, they shaped the entire world. And it started early. The Shang dynasty gave us oracle bones, the first Chinese writing, and then later dynasties brought us things like paper, gunpowder, the compass, just revolutionary stuff.
Each one of those was a total game changer. Think about the oracle bones from around 1200 BCE. They weren't just writing practice, they were used for divination. Kings would ask questions about harvests, war, sickness, royal births. They'd carve the questions onto bones or turtle shells, heat them till they cracked, and then priests would read the cracks as answers from the ancestors or gods. And crucially, they often carved the question and the interpretation right there on the bone. So we get these amazing historical snapshots, direct insight into their beliefs, their worries, their history, the structure of their state. It was systematic record keeping from the get-go. Then, paper. Before paper, writing was on bamboo strips, silk, clay, cumbersome, expensive. The invention of paper, usually credited to Kai Lun around 105 CE in the Han Dynasty, that completely changed everything for communication and knowledge. Suddenly, written stuff was lighter, cheaper, easier to carry. Huge impact on education, literature, art, and especially government. Imagine how much more efficient administration became. Record keeping for a vast empire. Paper made it possible on a whole new scale. It spread knowledge far wider than ever before, kind of democratized information in a way, absolutely foundational for managing a huge centralized state.
And gunpowder.
Yeah.
We think weapons immediately, right? But its beginnings were actually quite different, maybe even accidental.
Totally. Gunpowder was first mixed by Taoist alchemists, probably in the 9th century, Tang Dynasty. Ironically, they were looking for an elixir of immortality, something medicinal. Its first uses weren't destructive at all. They were in fireworks, using its explosive power for beauty, for celebrations, not war. It was only later, through more experimentation, that people figured out its military uses. Early cannons, bombs, flamethrowers. It evolved over time. The compass, though, developed around the 11th century, Song Dynasty. That was huge for navigation, originally used for geomancy, like feng shui, figuring out auspicious layouts. But applying it to ships, game changer, allowed for longer, safer, more accurate sea voyages, opened up exploration, massively expanded global trade, connected China to the world like never before. All these inventions show this deep scientific curiosity, a real focus on practical solutions, and a systematic approach to innovation that put China way ahead technologically for centuries.
And of course, you can't talk China without the Great Wall. We know it's thousands of miles long. And it wasn't just one project, right? It was built, rebuilt, added to over centuries by different dynasties, a real symbol of endurance.
The Great Wall is so much more than just a wall. It's a physical symbol of human endurance, of centralized power, and incredible labor organization. Every section, like you say, tells a story. About war, about culture, about sheer persistence over millennia, building it across mountains, deserts. It obviously points to long-standing worries about defense, mainly against nomadic groups from the north. But it also shows the consistent ability of Chinese states to mobilize huge amounts of resources, people, materials, engineering know-how. Think of the logistics, getting stone, earth, bricks, feeding workers across vast, difficult landscapes. It represents this incredible long-term vision for security, for defining their territory, unmatched in scale in the ancient world. It's like a physical embodiment of unity and determination.
So wrapping up this section, what's a big takeaway? Ancient China seems to have this almost unbroken line of innovation, influencing us even today, maybe more than we realize.
Yeah, if you look at the big picture, China's continuous civilization, this constant buildup of technology, it offers a really unique view on how societies evolve, long-term thinking. Unlike many other ancient places that rose and fell, China kept this core cultural and political identity going, adapting through different dynasties. That stability allowed knowledge to accumulate, technology to advance over centuries, leading to inventions that eventually spread worldwide and changed history. It really highlights the power of sustained organization, curiosity, and that practical approach to solving problems. Their ability to blend philosophy, complex government, and practical invention into this enduring civilization. It's a powerful lesson in longevity and innovation.
Okay, from the enduring legacy of China, let's shift focus now. We're heading towards what many see as the foundations of Western thought, politics, and power, ancient Greece and Rome.
Let's start with Greece, the birthplace of democracy, powerful drama, and so much philosophy. A culture that really valued ideas, shaping how we argue, think, and even run our societies today.
It's really not an overstatement. Figures like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, they literally built the framework for Western thinking. Their ideas are the bedrock of our logic, ethics, political theory. Socrates, questioning everything, seeking truth through dialogue. Plato, thinking about ideal forms, justice, how society should be run in the Republic. Aristotle, focused on observation, logic, covering everything from biology to politics. Their thinking is still woven into education, law, science. They were the original critical thinkers, pushing people to question, analyze, always search for deeper understanding. And out of that same intellectual energy came democracy, first in Athens, a radical idea back then, citizens actually participating in making decisions. And drama, those powerful tragedies exploring human flaws and morality, the sharp comedies critiquing society, the creative formats we still use to tell our stories. These weren't just abstract things. They represented a real shift in how society was organized, encouraging participation and a deeper look at what it means to be human.
And then the Romans came along. They seem to have taken all that Greek thinking and just built on it. Literally made it practical, organized, massive.
Exactly. If the Greeks excelled at the thinking part, the Romans were the masters of doing. Incredible engineers, organizers, pragmatists, their roads, aqueducts, their use of concrete. These things are proof of their practical genius, and so much of it is still standing thousands of years later. That's amazing. Roman concrete, using that volcanic act, was incredibly strong and versatile, allowed them to build things like the Pantheon's dome unsupported, or those massive aqueducts stretching for miles. Their roads connected the whole empire, not just for travel, but for moving troops fast, for trade, for communication, held the empire together. Aqueducts brought clean water into cities, supporting huge populations, improving public health. It all shows this relentless focus on efficiency, on public works, on applying engineering to build and sustain this enormous empire, a real understanding of infrastructure.
And speaking of Roman society, we have to touch on the gladiators. Kind of like their version of reality TV, maybe, but incredibly violent, bloody, loud, packed arenas like the Colosseum. Seems almost like a contradiction to their engineering and philosophy.
The gladiatorial games were definitely extreme, yeah. But they tell us a lot about Roman society, their values, and even how they maintained control. These spectacles were often state-sponsored. They showed off Roman courage, virtus, celebrated military wins, led off social scheme. And crucially, they were part of that bread and circuses idea, keeping the masses entertained and distracted, helping leaders stay popular and in control. They reinforced Roman ideals: discipline, bravery, facing death with honor, even if it was staged. Brutal, yes, but also a kind of social release valve, a public spectacle connecting the rulers and the ruled, however violently. The different types of gladiators, their training, it was a whole complex subculture. Shows a civilization that could be both deeply philosophical and incredibly pragmatic, valuing order, spectacle, and a very specific kind of tough entertainment.
So trying to grasp the impact of Greece and Rome together, it feels like their ideas and structures are just baked into our modern world, doesn't it? Almost hard to separate out.
What's really striking is how these two cultures, distinct but connected, basically gave the Western world its starting kit. Greece provided the intellectual tools: democracy, philosophy, logic, ethics. Rome provided the practical implementation: law, engineering, large-scale organization, infrastructure, our languages, our architecture, our legal systems, even our calendar. So much comes directly from them. They set the models for government, city planning, engineering, culture that were copied, adapted, built on for centuries. Shows how powerful foundational ideas and practical solutions can be when they work together. It's that combination of thinking and doing.
Okay, let's take a big leap now, across the ocean to the Americas, where completely unique, highly advanced civilizations emerge, often using totally different technologies than the old world. We're going to look at two incredible examples that really make you rethink what progress means: the Maya and the Incas.
Let's start with the Maya in Mesoamerica. Their understanding of astronomy was just phenomenal, almost uncanny. They could track stars, planets, even predict solar eclipses with amazing accuracy. This wasn't just casual stargazing. It implies really advanced math. They even developed the concept of zero independently. and a complex, cyclical view of time. Their calendar system was incredibly sophisticated. They had a 365-day solar calendar, like ours, but also a 260-day sacred calendar, all interwoven. Let them organize farming, rituals, politics with incredible precision. Rivals anything seen elsewhere at the time. What does that tell us? It points to amazing intellectual power, sharp observation skills honed over generations, and this dedicated pursuit of knowledge, probably linked to religion, agriculture, and power. Their accuracy was just extraordinary.
And here's the part that just floors me about the Maya. No metal tools for building, no wheels for transport, yet they built these massive, intricately carved temples, huge cities, hidden deep in the jungle. How do they even manage that?
It's an incredible example of human ingenuity and just sheer determination, isn't it? Without iron or bronze, they used very effective stone-cooled obsidian, chert for quarrying and carving. And no wheel meant moving huge blocks of stone, tons and tons sometimes, had to be done with pure human power, probably using log rollers, sledges, ramps, levers, across really tough jungle terrain. That required incredible organization, coordinating huge numbers of people, and a really deep, practical understanding of physics. And their buildings weren't just big, they were covered in complex carvings. Shows amazing artistic skill alongside the engineering. It really forces you to reconsider what advanced technology even means. Shows that sophisticated societies can develop in completely different ways, using the resources they have brilliantly. Challenges our assumptions about the right way for civilization to develop.
Okay, moving south from the Maya, up into the Andes Mountains. High up, we find the Incas, and their most famous site, Machu Picchu, that stunning city in the clouds.
The Incas were absolute masters of highland engineering. Their stonework is just legendary, so precise. Think about it. Walls built from huge stones cut so perfectly they fit together without any mortar. You can't even slip a knife blade between them. This raises that question again. How do they do that without mortar or iron tools? They used a technique called ashlar masonry, cutting stones incredibly precisely to lock together. Gravity and friction hold them tight. They likely used harder stones to patiently pound and grind the softer building stones into the exact shapes needed. Trial and error, fitting each stone perfectly to its neighbors. Not only did it look beautiful, it made the buildings incredibly earthquake resistant, which is crucial in the Andes. The interlocking stones could shift slightly during a quake, like a shock absorber, preventing collapse. This amazing engineering, plus incredible craftsmanship, and their unique labor system called mita, allowed them to build an empire right into the mountains. Roads, terraces, cities, and one of the toughest environments on Earth.
So what's the big takeaway here? These American civilizations, they achieved incredible things using totally different toolkits than the old world. Makes you rethink the whole idea of progress, doesn't it?
It completely dismantles any single linear idea of technological development. Shows that complex cities, science, huge architecture, they don't require wheels or iron or certain kinds of writing. Human ingenuity is incredibly flexible. Find solutions using whatever is available. The Maya and Incas show how different environments, different cultural priorities lead to diverse but equally valid paths of innovation. Their achievements highlight that amazing human capacity for organization, abstract thought, and massive collective effort. Reminds us there are many ways to build a thriving civilization. True progress is about solving your unique challenges creatively, a powerful lesson in seeing development differently.
All right, as we get near the end of our deep dive, let's touch on something truly mysterious: the lost civilizations. These are cultures that left behind amazing clues art, buildings proving they were here, they were sophisticated. But then, for reasons we're still trying to figure out, they just faded away, vanished, leaving us with these tantalizing puzzles.
Let's start with the Olmecs. They were in Mesoamerica way before the Maya, often called the mother culture because they influenced so many later groups. They're famous for those massive stone heads, huge basalt sculptures, some weighing 40 tons, carved with incredible detail, probably representing rulers. Just imagine the effort. Quarrying those huge stones miles away, dragging them through swamps, probably on log rollers or rafts, then carving and setting them up. It's staggering. That alone makes you ask, what kind of society could organize that? How much power did their leaders have? What exactly were these heads for? Portraits, gods, ancestors, markers, their sheer size, the logistics. It points to a very organized society, strong leadership, powerful beliefs. But so much about their daily lives, their politics, it's still a mystery. We're piecing it together from these amazing silent monuments.
And then there's Easter Island, Rapa Nui, famous for those eerie Moai statues, giant stone figures, hundreds of them, staring out across the island, haunting.
The moai are incredible feats of craftsmanship and communal effort, nearly 1,000 of them. Like the Olmec heads, how they moved them from the quarry, Ranararaku, to the coastal platforms, the Ahu, sometimes miles away. That's still debated. Did they walk them with ropes, roll them on logs? Whatever it was, it took huge coordination. But the bigger story, the more critical mystery perhaps, is what happened to the Rapa Nui civilization itself. It declined dramatically, vanished in its complex form, leaving behind a damaged environment, a much smaller population. The main theory points towards ecological collapse, cutting down almost all the trees, maybe to move the statues, clear land for farming, leading to resource depletion, soil erosion, maybe conflict. It serves as this stark warning from history, doesn't it, about the fragility of island ecosystems, maybe all ecosystems, and the potential consequences of pushing resources too far. These lost civilizations, the Olmecs, the Rapa Nui, they share this common sad story in a way. They left behind amazing art, incredible engineering, unique cultures. But then they faded, transformed, leaving questions, legends, and just enough clues to keep us searching. It really highlights how fragile civilizations can be. Climate change, using up resources, internal conflict, disease, invasion, or often a mix of these things, can bring down even advanced societies. It's a reminder that empires aren't forever. They're complex systems, vulnerable to big pressures, inside and out. Their fate kind of underscores the importance of sustainability, adaptability, understanding our own vulnerabilities today.
And that's where it gets really fascinating, doesn't it? These lost worlds, they remind us that history isn't just about the stuff we know, the stuff neatly filed away. It's also profoundly about the huge mysteries still out there, the things we might never fully understand. Keeps the past interesting, keeps us asking questions. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's circle back. What have we really learned from all these ancient worlds? From Sumerians inventing writing, the Incas sculpting mountains, Egyptians chasing eternity, Romans building empires of concrete, and the silences of the Indus, the questions left by the Olmecs and Rapa Nui. What's the common thread?
Well, I think what comes through loud and clear across every single one we've looked at is that humans have always been driven to build, to think, to dream, to organize, and yes, sometimes, sadly, to destroy too. These civilizations, they're amazing successes, and sometimes they're tragic ends. They absolutely laid the foundations for who we are. Our laws, our science, how we live in cities, how we govern ourselves, our philosophy, how we communicate, how we build. It all started with them. They face the same big questions we still face. How do we live together? How do we manage our planet? How do we make sense of the universe? How do we leave something meaningful behind? Their stories are really our own origin stories.
And that leaves us with one last big question, something for you listening right now to think about. If entire advanced civilizations with all their smarts and power could just vanish, leaving only mysterious clues, what does that really suggest about the permanence, the resilience of our own global society today? What lessons from their successes and their failures, their grand experiments, should we really be taking to heart as we face our own huge challenges?
Keep wondering about the past. It's never really gone. It's just waiting there in the echoes, holding lessons we desperately need if we just take the time to listen.